Now, President Obama has received criticism from the right wing because he won't call groups like ISIS Islamic radicals. Now, I'm less subtle. I probably would call them Islamic radicals, and I do, and because that is what they are, right? Now, President Obama has a slightly better strategy than I do, and he explains it. He says, they're not religious leaders, they are terrorists. We're not at war with Islam, we're at war with people who have perverted Islam. Okay, to me, you know, I'm not a religious person, I'm agnostic. So whenever I hear people bending over backwards to say, well, it's not, no, the religion is only the good stuff, and these guys are doing the bad stuff, so by definition, they must not be Muslims or Christians or whatever else. I go, yeah, if you say so. The bad stuff and the good stuff is in the text, it's in the Quran, it's in the Bible, it's in the Old Testament. And you could argue that they're quite Christian or quite Muslim if they practice the good stuff or the bad stuff. But he has a better point here where he says, look, I don't want to empower them. They want to say that they represent Islam and so they can get more fighters on their side. He said, we must never accept the premise that they put forward because it is a lie. Because they claim to be the caliphate, the leaders of the Muslim world. If you keep calling them Muslims, that helps their argument. He's like, why would I want to help their propaganda? I don't want to help their propaganda. I want to reach out to the 1.6 billion Muslims and tell them we're on their side and get them to fight against ISIS with us, as Jordan is doing, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, etc. I don't want to say, oh, those guys are Muslims and do damage to our cause. Now, I couldn't get myself to do that anyway because they are Muslims, and I'd have to say it, right? And they certainly do not represent all Muslims. I've said that a million times. But they happen to be Muslim radicals, right? Muslim fanatics, fundamentalists. But if you're the leader of the country and you want to beat them, this is a perfectly smart strategy where you say they do not represent Muslims. Real Muslims are on our side. So he went on to conclude, they no more represent Islam than any madman who kills in the name of Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Hinduism. No religion is responsible for terrorism. People are responsible for violence and terrorism. Now, you would think the conservatives would be in favor of that argument because they love to say, for example, guns don't kill people kill people. So I imagine they'd be in favor of an argument that said, Islam doesn't kill people kill people. Surprisingly, they're not that into that argument. Instead, they go into histrionics. And now when we talk about histrionics, Don Rumsfeld is an excellent example these days. He went on TV to talk about how the world is nearly at an end. Watch.
It is a terrible thing that's happening in our world, and it brings back to mind the period before World War II, where people said, I didn't know, or I was just following orders, or it's random. But when you systematically kill Jews and kill Christians and say that's what you're doing, it's not random.
Who's saying it's not a problem? He just wanted to compare it to World War II. In World War II, at a minimum, 13 million people died from the Nazis, let alone what the Russians killed, let alone the soldiers. We're just talking about civilians, right? So, no, we're not at World War II. And what does that mean that people looked aside? Nobody's looking aside. Everybody's screaming from the rooftops, ISIS, ISIS, watch out for ISIS. All right, but more needless analogies from Rumsfeld.
I get a lot of emails from a lot of viewers.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Who are very concerned about this and who identify the enemy as Islamic extremism, and it's very clear who they're getting. They're killing Jews, they're killing Christians. So, I think that at least a lot of our viewers, they're onto it. It's obvious to them. They are very disenchanted because they don't know what this White House's strategy is.
I mean, I think back to the 1930s when the Holocaust was going on and the Nazis were killing Jews by the tens of thousands. And the United States government turned away ships filled with Jews from our ports, and they ended up going down to the Dominican Republic and finally being admitted to their country by that dictator down there so many decades ago. And the anti-Semitism that's rising in the world today, we read about Jewish cemeteries being desecrated, synagogues being attacked, and it is important that we not have a leadership vacuum.
But where's the leadership vacuum? Who isn't abhorring what happened to the synagogues? Who isn't speaking out against it? Everybody in the world is speaking out against that. I mean, if his analogy is right, the people that ISIS is killing the most are fellow Muslims. They target Shias more than anything else. So should we accept boatloads full of Shia Muslims here to protect them from ISIS? My guess is Rumsfeld would say a definitive no to that question. One more from Rumsfeld.
It seems to me the only thing that could change it is not going to be the press. It's not going to be the Congress. It would have to be people in his cabinet, people in his White House staff going in and saying, look, we've been wrong. We're making a mistake. We're going to have to calibrate and deal with this problem, or the vacuum we've created is going to impose an enormous cost on this country in time, in money, cost, and in blood.
You're the one who created the vacuum. You did the Iraq War. And he says, oh, they have to admit they're wrong. You're the guy who said, we know where the weapons of mass destruction are. They are north, west, east, and south of Tikrit. Did you ever admit you were wrong about that? They weren't in any of those places. You're the one who did the Iraq War, which then gave rise to ISIS. When is your apology coming down, Rumsfeld? He didn't create ISIS. He didn't create this chaos in Iraq. He didn't open that Pandora's box. You did. Where's your goddamn apology? All right, now, speaking of guys who need to apologize, we could go to Ted Cruz next, because of course he's going to take it over the top.
What undermines the global effort is for the President of the United States to be an apologist for radical Islamic terrorists, to analogize it to the Crusades from 700 years ago. You know, what would be far better to see is the kind of courage that was demonstrated just a few weeks ago by Egyptian President al-Sisi. Now, President al-Sisi in Cairo gave a speech that was courageous when he called out the radical Islamic terrorists. And President al-Sisi is a Muslim.
He's like, look, I just praised one Muslim who kind of happens to be a dictator, which we kind of like. Oh, you should see what I think of King Abdullah. Oh, I love that guy, right? And he took such courage for al-Sisi to speak out against Muslim fundamentalists. He did a coup against Muslim fundamentalists. That's his political enemy. It doesn't take much courage. Of course he's against Muslim fundamentalists. And he just killed 21 Egyptians. It wasn't like this bold move like, oh my, look at al-Sisi. General al-Sisi fighting against Muslim fundamentalists. That's kind of what he does. So it's not some big, bold move. I mean, to say that the president is an apologist for Islamic terrorism, there used to be a bottom of the barrel. It doesn't exist anymore. But more importantly, to the President Obama's first point, don't feed the trolls. In this case, a rare case, it's not Rumsfeld and Cruz who are the trolls. It's ISIS who are the trolls, who are trying to get your attention by doing the most despicable things on the planet. And here comes Cruz and Rumsfeld to help them. Oh, yeah, ISIS, they're so huge, they're so grand. Oh, my God, they represent Muslims. Oh, they're the caliphate. You're giving ISIS exactly what they want, you idiots. So, of course, he's not going to stop. One last one from Cruz.
And he said, we Muslims need to stand up together against these radical terrorists who are perverting our faith and turning it into a mandate for murder. Why don't we see the President of the United States demonstrating that same courage just to speak the truth?
Oh, why doesn't he just show that kind of courage and attack ISIS? Recent conservative talking point was Egypt did an airstrike after their people were killed. Jordan did an airstrike after their people were killed. Why aren't we doing airstrikes? We've done 2,400 airstrikes against ISIS. We've done more airstrikes than the rest of the world combined. So not only is it counterproductive, it's totally wrong. Their talking points are made up. You're not helping at all. Of course, the bottom line is Ted Cruz doesn't want to help our fight against ISIS. He wants to help his own political career. And the easiest way to do that is to demagogue.